My name is Ryan Clark. I am the local news editor with The Post, and I'm sitting here with Athens City Law Director Pat Lang, who's also running for a seat in Congress with the 15th Congressional District in Ohio. Welcome, Mr. Lang.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Good. I want to start off the conversation kind of with a little bit of background to kind of understand who you are and how you kind of got to the place you are with these aspirations to be a congressman in Washington, D.C. So you can just talk a little bit.
Just general background?
Sure,
well,
sure.
I'm originally from a town called Albany, which is a little bit down the road from here, and came to Athens initially to attend Ohio University in the 1990s, and I was a poli-sci major here, and as an undergrad served a term on was elected to the Athens City Council while I was here. I guess I'm told anyway that I was the first student that has ever done that. I don't know whether that's true or not. That's what they said at the time. And then went on to law degree. I did a law degree from the University of Cincinnati, and then I've worked. Came back to Athens County after that, and have worked as a felony prosecutor for the county, putting violent criminals behind bars and doing other things as well for the city. And then I was elected Athens Law Director in 2007, and it's a job that I continue to work today.
What kind of made you, helped you with the decision to become a politician? I know you said you studied poli-sci in college. What helped you kind of steer towards that career path?
I think most people that are involved in public service or in politics, at their core, want to make a difference. I mean, I think that sounds kind of corny, but it really is the motivation for most people, that get into this line of work. And particularly, take a race like this where, I grew up at a time where, and I think this is still true in some places, but there was a basic agreement in place between government and between the people, and it said that, if you work hard, if you play by the rules, and pay your taxes, then government's going to try to keep up its end of the bargain. We're going to give you good roads and bridges. We're going to give you retirement security. We're going to provide things like student financial aid, and we're really seeing those values under assault from Washington today. And so that was why what motivated me to get involved in this race for Congress.
As far as your political career as it stands now, what would you say are some of the major successes that you've had to this point?
Well, I mean, when you say political career, I mean, really most of it has been as law director of Athens, so that's not really a policy. I mean, there's not, I don't get to vote on anything. I don't get to enact policies. I'm basically an advisor to city officials, but I've been able to, to advise, on some issues, and to really, I would say, just trying to be accessible, number one, both to the public and to the officials that I'm advising, and then also, again, most of my background not really being so much political as it's been as a prosecutor. So I was able, I mean, that was a very rewarding thing to do, to be able to try to get justice for victims of crimes, and that's something that even to some degree in my job now, I oversee a staff of 3 full-time prosecutors, and so I still get to be involved a little bit on the criminal justice side, and that's very rewarding.
Okay. Now I know when the old Athens County prosecutor David Warren announced his resignation that you put your foot in the race for that. What made you decide that that may not have been the best course, and now you're going to try a meaningful political office instead of as a law official? Well,
I mean, there was a committee of 60 people that kind of made their decision on that, and that's fine. As I'm traveling around this new district here, which is all are parts of 12 counties, it's not it's something that you have to try to remind yourself as a candidate is that it's not about you as the candidate. That it's about the people and their issues and their values, and so that's one of the things I'm trying to do now, is to travel as much as I can, on most evenings and weekends, to kind of get out and try to get to know some very new and diverse areas, and so that I can best, hopefully have a chance to represent them in Washington.
Would you say that, for the most part, you have gotten to know the Athens area very well, but you haven't necessarily gotten to know?
I think that's fair. I mean, I was born in Athens County. I went to college here, and I've lived here for most of my life, so I certainly feel like I understand this area and some of the surrounding counties in the Appalachian part of the state. But some of these counties, particularly you get out into the western areas, parts of the district around Fayette and Clinton counties, are places that that I haven't had as much exposure to, and so it's kind of exciting. It's an opportunity to introduce yourself and to meet people for the first time, and so I really am enjoying that aspect of it.
Now, do you feel that you can represent those different areas because you have been your experience is mainly from Athens County? Do you think you can represent those other areas as well?
Well, everybody's got to be from somewhere.
Sure.
My opponent, Congressman Stivers, in this case, is from Upper Arlington, which I would argue is also not the most representative part of the district. But I think moreover, it's really a question of just, do you have the sorts of values that translate well to other areas. And having grown up in a rural area, again, just a place where people are hardworking by nature and are just right now, unfortunately, not having the sorts of economic opportunity that they should have to be able to sustain a family and to build a retirement. And that's why it's important that Washington be working as a partner with the middle class instead of just being focused entirely on what they can do to give away things to the people at the very top, to the big corporations, to the Wall Street crowd. While trying to do things like cut student aid, for younger folks, and cut Medicare for older folks, and it's just like I said, we're trying to restore some balance and restore the right values to Washington.
You spoke about Congressman Stivers. What do you think kind of separates you from him in the political race?
Just about everything.
Sure.
You've got the geographical, element, is one thing, but really the biggest thing is just a question of values. Before he went to Congress, Congressman Stivers was a banking lobbyist, so that was his job, was to go to Congress and try to convince people to give the sweetheart deals to the banks and to the Wall Street crowd. Since he's been in Washington, he's continued to do that. Only now he's voting with them as a member instead of trying to lobby them from the outside. And again, while doing nothing on jobs, everybody agrees that jobs is the big issue that needs to be addressed right now. Congress, more than a year in now, has done nothing at all to pass any sort of comprehensive jobs legislation. Although they voted for a number of other things, including to end Medicare, to slash student lending, and I just don't think these are the right priorities. So I would say I'm different from Congressman Stivers, and by just about every measure, at least politically.
Okay. You mentioned Congressman Stivers' background. How do you think your background? You haven't been a legislative representative for the majority of your career. How do you think your experiences will help you in that regard?
Well, I think that's a good thing, number one. I think part of what's wrong with the system right now is you've got a bunch of folks in Washington that are so entrenched and have so much experience, if you want to use that word, in the ways of Washington, that they refuse to even sit down and talk to the other side about anything. That's why we've got this. That's why we can't pass a jobs bill right now. It's because neither party will talk to the other side, because that's just sort of how the culture has evolved in Washington. And so I think in order to change Washington, you're going to have to change the people that you're sending there. My background as a criminal prosecutor and as a law director is not a political. You don't take a political approach to problems. You take a problem-solving approach, and I think that's much more in line with how most regular people are and what they expect out of their leaders. And so I think it's I take that as a great point of pride that I have not that I don't have a great background of being an elected legislator.
Okay. I know you've kind of outlined a few of your the things that you would like to change. If you can give a broad oversight of these are the, say, 5 things that you wanted to change.
I think you could kind of sum it all up by just talking. I mean, the theme is that of middle class values, middle class issues, kitchen table issues. So we've touched a little bit on education, Medicare, which is one that I don't know how many readers of the Post are following that too closely as an issue, but I can tell you that for millions of American seniors who have worked for years and counted, and under part of that deal that we talked about, understanding that retirement security is going to be there for you. For them, it's a very offensive thing that Congressman Stivers voted to eliminate the program as we know it, to basically voucherize the program. They're appalled when they learn that. Obviously, the jobs issue that we've talked a little bit about. And I guess we haven't really talked too much in detail on the education issue. I guess sure. I should at least touch on that, given with the Post and everything. I've been a loyal reader for I guess 15 years now. Whatever how long has it been since I started here? That was an issue that was a big part of my life personally, because coming from a poor background in a small town, I worked jobs when I was in college, delivered pizzas, but I also required quite a bit of financial aid to get through. I had Pell Grants, I had student loans. Same thing when I went on to law school. I worked as well, but just with what's happening, and this was, this is a situation where costs have only continued to increase, since the time that I was in school. So it's even worse now. But I'm in a position now where I still pay student loans every month, and will for some time, and that's just kind of the norm. And so that's why it's offensive to look to Washington and to see people trying to cut financial aid, to try to privatize the lending industry, to try to slash Pell Grants, because without the help of of the government, and without having been brought up with a work ethic that told me to go out and work while I'm in school and things like that, I wouldn't have had an opportunity to go to school. And so it offends me that Washington wants to make it harder for people that grew up like I did to have a chance to get an education.
You spoke about the ability for people to get money to pay for college, but what about the affordability of college? Because college prices have skyrocketed in recent years. Do you think there's any changes that need to be made in that area?
I mean, unfortunately, for the most part, that's a state issue, and so that's an area where we've seen, for a time we had a state tuition cap that was put on, but of course, even when you put on a tuition cap, universities can be very creative about finding ways around that. We're going to call something a fee instead of calling it tuition. We're going to find other ways to kind of nickel and dime, the students here. And so I'm gravely concerned about the rapid increase in the cost of an education, even from public universities. There is certainly a role that the states can play as far as making sure that we're making that an adequate funding priority. So that every time we're having budget cuts, we're not looking at higher education automatically as one of the first places to be cut. But I also think that there's a role to play that the universities can play in trying to rein in their costs and to try to one of the areas where really kind of focus in on where those areas of robust growth within the university's budget has been, and to maybe address some of those areas instead of looking always to just tack another few $100 a semester or per quarter onto the student bill.
How important would you say education is to the United States as a nation?
It's absolutely critical if we're going to continue to be a world leader. I'll say that. For better or worse, when you look at where are the good jobs that are being created, more and more often they're jobs that are going to require higher education. And so we've always typically had an agreement in this country, kind of again that pact between the people and the government. And one of the government responsibilities traditionally in America has been to provide good quality public education, both in K through 12 and in post-secondary and higher education. And so now, given the state of the economy and the increasing competitiveness around the world, now would be the absolute wrong time to go back on that commitment to higher education.
How do you feel that the government is currently fulfilling that? Are they fulfilling that commitment to higher education and to students who are in school right now?
Not as well as they could be, certainly. And again, this gets back to an area where there's also a lot of state government involvement in this, so it varies a little bit from state to state. But generally speaking, again, I think when you look to Washington, this is clearly higher education is clearly not a priority either when it comes to finding ways to help states to fund the education itself, or when it comes to helping students through Pell Grants or through loans to be able to help to afford an education. That's an area where right now Washington is looking to cut. And so those of us that tend to favor and believe that there's a strong role to be played in helping to make college education affordable for all Americans, they're sort of on defense in Washington right now, trying to hold back the cuts. And so if I get a chance to go there, then that's certainly going to be one of my higher priorities.
Sure. Okay. We spoke a little bit before about healthcare in this country. I was wondering what your stance is on the current, environment of healthcare and what you think could be changed for the better.
I think it's far too expensive. I mean, when you look at what we pay in America compared to what is paid, whether you're talking about the care itself, whether you're talking about prescription drugs, I mean, there's just there's a runaway cost problem, and that so I mean, the government has done some things to try to address the accessibility problem, but unfortunately has done very little in my opinion to address costs, and that is one of the areas that I think would need to be explored further as far as if we're going to look at a comprehensive healthcare solution. Of course, we had the healthcare bill that was passed, and there were some very good elements in that,
sure,
and some things that were not as good. But I think big picture, we're going to have to do something to get costs under control.
If you had been in Congress when the healthcare bill came through, would you have voted for it?
When they were passing this bill and talking about this bill, the White House and the Speaker's office, they weren't calling to get my input on it,
sure,
so I'm
sure.
not going to commit to having supported a bill that I had nothing to do in the creation of. I think that there would have been a lot of things that would have gone into that, and so I'm really focused on what we can do to improve what we've got now.
You said that there were some good parts and some not so good parts. Can you explain those parts a little bit?
I think there were some very good parts in that for one thing, it said we're not going to allow insurance companies to discriminate against you anymore if you have a pre-existing illness or pre-existing injury. It said that parents can keep their children on their insurance policies up to age 26. It closed what's known as the Medicare loop, donut hole, which basically was a gap in funding under the Medicare program. And so there were some very good things off the bat, that it did. But again, unfortunately, I think if there was anything specifically that could have been done better, I wish there would have been more about cost containment in there, because I really think that is the one area where things are kind of spinning out of control right now.
Do you have any idea how costs could be better contained in healthcare?
I mean, it's obviously a very complicated area. I think one of the things that you can do is when you look at the profits that are being made by insurance companies in America today, they're making record profits at a time when costs are continuing to escalate. So you really need to take a hard look at okay, why is that the case? Why is it, and how much of that is contributing to the cost issue? I mean, when you look at how much, in some cases less than 50 cents of every healthcare dollar actually going toward healthcare itself, and the rest of it is going toward insurance or administration. There've got to be some ways that some savings can be built in on that side, so that we're not just having a middleman here to create profits and add to the cost of healthcare for everybody.
Okay. Then some other kind of issues that I would say are important to college-age students.
Yeah.
What is your stance on the legalization of marijuana?
I think it's a state issue. I mean, there's really not much role that the federal government should have to play in that. I think states can decide for themselves, what is best for their state.
And then recently, big headlines were made with the SOPA and PIPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act. What are your opinions on legislation of that sort?
My understanding of those two specific bills was that, the real problem is not so much that, I think most people agree that, that people should, people that are in the creative business and that are creating content should be able to make a living off of that content and not have it stolen. The problem with those pieces of legislation were that they were so broad that they basically would have led to, situations in which domestic, internet sites, would be able to potentially be sued or be able to potentially have to come under some sort of a sanction as a result of merely just passing along content from other sites. And so I think that was really, so I certainly joined that chorus of people who thought that legislation went too far.
Okay. And also another big headline thing, especially locally in Athens, has been the fracking issue. Do you think, what is your stance on that as well?
Yeah. I'm certainly extremely concerned about a lot of the things that I've heard about the practice itself. One of the frustrations is that, I think we're still very much at the early stages of whatever it is that fracking will go on to become,
sure.
In this state and in this country. And so we need to be getting good information, good scientific information as quickly as possible to determine exactly, to make sure that we're doing this in a safe way. I mean, fracking itself has been going on for a long time, but not on the kind of scale that we're seeing, here and now. But, all that said, we also cannot afford to ignore the prospect of jobs being brought to the area. And so that is something that, but again, you hear a lot of differing versions of the facts about how many jobs are truly being created. Are we actually creating jobs locally, or are we just kind of bringing in, people from state to state? And at the same time, again, on the environmental side, you hear a lot of conflicting information as well. So I'm very, on a federal level, and because again, state regulation is really the first, line of dealing with this issue. But on a federal level, I'll tell you, I'm extremely frustrated that the U.S. EPA is not able to release a report on this sooner. We still don't have a definitive, opinion from the leading environmental protection, agency that we have in this country, and that is certainly a big source of frustration.
We've also spoke about kind of the agreement, as you have called it, between people and the government as far as retirement and jobs and all of that. But obviously, you think that is not currently working. What do you think that needs to be changed on a federal level to get that agreement back in sync?
The first thing we can do is make job creation the top priority, which right now is clearly not. Again, Congress hasn't passed a jobs bill in over a year since this new Congress has been there. So, that's clearly far and away the first thing that needs to be done. I would also favor not extending the taxes, the Bush-era tax cuts on millionaires and billionaires, which blew a huge hole in the budget and are creating these record deficits that we're seeing now. But again, that's kind of where the priorities are in Washington right now, is what can we do for the people at the very top while basically just ignoring, the single biggest issue in this country today, which is creating good jobs for the middle class.
Gotcha. Kind of going back to Athens as your hometown, as your home area, how much support do you think the area will give you in your candidacy for Congress?
Hopefully a lot.
Sure.
We'll find out.
Do you think that other areas will be able to join in, say, with Athens to kind of maybe promote you to that position?
I really find that even though obviously it's a very diverse district, we've got some very rural areas, very urban areas, the values are pretty much even, wherever you go. The middle class values of trying to make work pay and trying to protect, retirement security for seniors, and for trying to provide educational opportunities for young people. That's a message that translates pretty well all across the district. So we've got very high hopes.
Well, that about sums up all the questions I had, unless there was anything else you wanted to speak about.
I can't have an interview with the Post and not talk about Ohio University,
Sure.
at least a little bit, and just the impact that's had in my life. Certainly, I can promise you that a lot of the good things that I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to do in my life would not have happened without Ohio University. And something that you really notice as you get out into the world and out and kind of the people, the alumni kind of scatter across the country, is just that there is a real passion that alumni have for this university, which goes, in my experience, far and above that of most other schools. One of my friends was telling me the other day, he's like, yeah, I've a lot of people in Washington that he knew that were Bobcats. He's like, you should go and try to get in contact with them, because I don't know what it is about you guys, but people that are from OU are really, really into being from OU, and that's something that I take as a point of pride, and just very, very proud to have gone here and to continue to be able to contribute to the OU community here in town.
All right, well, again, thank you very much for being with us, and good luck in your race.
All right, thank you very much.